everyone, welcome to our Halloween story time special. We are your hosts, Myco.
And Valerie. We're super excited to have a spooky yet fun show for you today. We've got some eerie stories, a lot of Halloween vibes, and a special guest joining us.
That's right, today we're joined by Micah, a student with some great stories to share. Micah, take it away for us on our first tale called The Drowning Pool of Hawaii.
Hi guys, happy to be here. Alright. Is Waimea Falls haunted? The Honolulu Daily Reporter asked curiously. Do you have any stories about unusual things happening there? Yes, I said straightforwardly. There are many stories about the pond. Why? There has been another drowning there, she continued, and when I was doing the background research on earlier deaths associated with the pond, I felt something was a little strange. What is the story you know about the pond? In the Obake files, I explained to her, I'd shared a story, which is my most authentic ghost story, since it's the only tale I have ever collected, which was given to me with a copy of the police report verifying the facts as reported by retired Honolulu Police Department officer Buddy Adolphson. It is not often that a ghost story comes with such an official document proving its veracity. I told her the full story, which Officer Adolphson had first shared with me in 1986, as we sat not 100 feet away from that ancient pool of sacred water. It was a tale which began on July 26, 1952, when Bill Lawrence, a merchant marine from Seattle, jumped from the 40-foot top of Waimea Falls into the pond below. As his four mainland friends watched horrified, Bill missed the footing, hit his head on the side of the cliff, and slammed into the pond with a loud snapping sound. A later autopsy would reveal that he broke his neck and probably died instantly. His friends instantly dove into the dark waters to get their friend. They dove again and again, but they could not find his remains. About 10 minutes later, they told the police, his back suddenly popped up out of the water. They could see only the tip of his shoulder blades. His head, arms, legs, and torso were twisted in the water in such a way that only the back was sticking up. He was probably jackknifed in the water. They quickly swam over to retrieve him, praying he was still alive. Then, just as they got within a couple feet of his floating remains, his body began violently shaking in the water, twisted, and then sank like a brick to the bottom of the pond. It was so sudden, it seemed literally as if someone had grabbed his trunks and yanked him back into the water. Again, his friends dove in after him to no avail. Their friend had vanished. At 3 o'clock, the Honolulu Police Department and the Haleiwa Police Station got a call that their friend had drowned at Waimea Falls. Sergeant Adolphson went out there with a dozen volunteers and some 13 firemen and a rescue team to recover the corpse. They had 10-foot poles with hooks at the end, which they used to dredge up the bottom of the murky waters. Divers tried to locate the body, but with no luck. Nets were dropped and pulled through the water to no avail. That day, no body was found at the bottom of the pond. The pond was only about 12 to 15 feet deep that summer. The diameter is only about 25 to 30 feet. Despite the fact that the pond was not that deep or large, the body of Bill Lawrence could not be found. It had seemingly disappeared. The sergeant told me that in his career with the HPD, he would pull many bodies out of that pond. However, most of them had vanished for about 2 or 3 days before they were recovered. It was one of the strange things about the pond which he never quite could figure out. Try as you might to find them, bodies just vanished in that pond. Then, a couple of days later, the body was just floating on the surface. Where had it been for all that time? Sometimes, when the water had emptied from the pond, the sergeant would walk around the bottom searching for an underwater rock ledge, a cave, or an underwater stream that connects to the pond. Anything that could help to explain why the bodies would not float, but get stuck at the bottom. No such evidence of any ledge, cave, or stream could be found. There was one pointed pyramidal rock, he explained, that had once been there on the bottom of the pond. On one occasion, a diver had slammed his head into the pointed tip of the stone. When the rock point embedded in his head, the victim was held underwater until he was found hours later. That stone, however, had been removed as a precaution. Nothing else could explain the strange disappearances in the surrounding pool. By sunset of July 26, 1952, the body of Bill Lawrence had still not been recovered. The valley was already getting dark when Sergeant Adolphson and his men called it quits for the day. Concerned about the well-being of the 4 other merchant marines, the sergeant offered them a place to stay at his house in Haleiwa. "No, Sergeant," they answered. "We'll stay here at the pond overnight. If Bill's body comes back up, we'll pull him out. We don't want any animals to eat him." So the sergeant left the 4 Haole men setting up camp at the pond as he and his crew hiked out of the valley. In the morning, when they returned, they were surprised to see the merchant marines nearly running out of Waimea Valley. "Glenn," he said, "I saw the 4 most scared Haole I've ever seen in my life come running out of the valley. They were white the day before, but you should have seen them that morning. They were like shark bait." "What in the heck happened to you guys?" the sergeant asked. "Last night something attacked us, Sergeant," they said nervously. "Attacked you? What in the world are you talking about?" After the sergeant left the valley, they explained, they had camped right near the pond. About 10 p.m., something came out of the pond. It moved out of the water and then began to move in the bushes. The men could hear this thing stalk them. As it moved about in the bushes, the thing would suddenly grab a bush, shake it violently, and then jump over them with a splash into the pond. 15 minutes later, the thing came out again, stalking them, shaking bushes, and then leaping back into the pond. Then, at about 1 a.m. in the morning, it began to make a horrible, tortured noise. Since the sergeant was a hunter who had lived and hunted in the North Shore most of his life, he knew every animal that lived in the wild, and some of them did make strange voices. "Listen, you guys," he said reassuringly. "You tell me the noise, and I'll tell you the animal, because there are some dogs and pigs and cats and birds and all kind of other wildlife in the valley." The sound from the pond that these men replicated convinced the sergeant that this had been no pig. For the men claimed that a series of horrible guttural screams came out of the water that night, which were the torment of a soul tortured in some pit of hell. Imagine the pain one would feel having their flesh flayed from their body alive. Then multiply that horror by 10. This was the sound which came from the pond in Waimea Valley on July 27th, 1952 at 1 a.m. The sergeant and the crew looked at one another with raised eyebrows. Either these Haole guys were the best storytellers they had ever seen, or some human being in the valley had been tortured in the valley the night before. "Come on," said the sergeant to the men. "We've got a job to do. Let's get that boy body, and then let's get out of here." As they approached the pond, the sergeant told me that his mouth dropped. In his whole life, he had never seen Waimea Falls Pond as crystal clear and as mirror smooth as he had seen it. Usually, the water was dark and murky from the sediment washing up off the walls of the cliff. But that morning, the water was as clear and as still as a glass of clean water. It was so clear they could see all the way to the bottom of the pond. Feeling very lucky that they would find the body of Bill Lawrence in the clear water, the sergeant and the volunteers looked everywhere on the bottom of the pond. The remains of the victim were nowhere to be found. So the sergeant climbed up to the top of the waterfall, hoping to see the body at a higher vantage point. It was about 30 minutes later that he did at last see the body laying face down on a big flat stone not far from the edge of the pond where his men were standing. The arms were placidly positioned at the side of the corpse. "I see the body," he called to his men on the walkie-talkie. "He's on a big rock about 10 feet from where you're standing." "We see the rock," the men called back up, "but we don't see any body." "Lower your hook and just try to catch him," the sergeant instructed. The hooks were then dropped and dragged across the top of the large stone that resembled an altar. "Okay, we got him," the men finally called out. "We got him." The body, which had not been visible from the side of the pond, was now clearly seen as the grappling hooks pulled up off his spear. The sergeant used a portable two-way radio to call the coroner in Haleiwa. "We found the victim," he told the medical officer. "Bring out the wagon and we'll meet you at Waimea Beach." Just then, the sergeant hung up the radio and looked down at his crew lifting the body out of the water, and he felt an electrical shock go through his body. The hair on his head and arms shot straight up as if he had plugged himself into an electrical outlet. The adrenaline pumped through his heart as he was watching something come out up from the pond, following the feet of Bill Lawrence. "What on earth? What is it, Sergeant?" his men screamed, backing away from the water. "What's going on?" Looking up the valley, he could see that the water in the stream had not increased in volume. The water in the falls had not risen, but slowly trickled over at the same rate. But there, where the feet had been pulled out of the pond, was a 2-foot column of water rising like a fountain. The water was churning wildly and lifting from the pond as if trying to follow the feet of the corpse. The sergeant then watched from his safe perch as the fountain expanded in size. 3 feet, 4 feet, 5 feet, until there appeared at the bottom of the pond a motion like 2 great arms moving back and forth. The pond was transforming into a giant washing machine, with the agitator speeding up faster and faster as if it was out of control. The water was lifting along the sides of the steep cliff. "Get the heck away from the pond!" he screamed to his men as his men picked up the victim's body and started running out of the valley. They got about 200 feet from the pond when they looked back to see an 8-foot tsunami chasing them down the valley. The pond had literally erupted, the water violently emptying out within minutes. The tidal wave hit them like a locomotive, picking them up and spewing them out of the mouth of the valley. Everything in the water's path was cleared out as the worst flood in a decade destroyed the lower part of the valley. The pond had completely emptied itself as new fresh water from the upstream slowly refilled the void. Fortunately, no one was killed in the flood and the body was recovered. But what freak accident of nature could have caused such flooding? The sergeant went to the University of Hawaii, where he showed his police report to a seismologist. Had there been any earth tremors that could explain the strange flood? According to the scientists, the island of Oahu was still at the moment the pond erupted. There had been no rains or flash flooding in the Mauka area behind the falls. In fact, the scientists told the sergeants there was no rational explanation for the description of events as contained in the police report. The look in the man's eyes suggested the sergeant had only fabricated the entire episode. The only reasonable explanation he was ever given for the events of July 26th through the 27th of 1952 came from an old Hawaiian kupuna who had lived all his life in the North Shore. When he heard the sergeant's story, he calmly explained what had happened to Bill Lawrence in the drowning pool. "Sergeant," he said wisely, "I think you went look for the body too soon. The akua had to throw out the lepo for the haole boy." As the sergeant understood the old man, the pond at Waimea Valley had an akua, or god, who occasionally desired human sacrifice. When the people jump into the pond, they do not understand that the waters are used in sacred ritual. The body was taken down to the ahu, or altar, the large flat rock on the bottom of the pond, where the ceremony is performed. Human sacrifice rituals lasted for several days in ancient times, the length of time that the bodies are frequently missing in the water. After the akua is finished with the ritual, the human remains would be disposable. At the time, the bodies reappeared. When the sergeant pulled the body out of the rock within 24 hours, the kupuna concluded the ritual was not finished. So the akua stirred the water up, washed off his altar, and threw the bad water out so the fresh, clean water could fill the pond. When I finished retelling the story in condensed fashion to the reporter from the daily newspaper, she indicated that she had heard from others about the altar rock at the bottom of the pond. Yet, it wasn't just the recent accident or legend of the sacrificial stone that had prompted her to call me. She was puzzled by something else, which at the time came as a great surprise to me. Did you know, she asked me, that the demographic profile of the victim in the last 50 years are startlingly similar? What do you mean? People who drowned in the pond are the same age, gender, race, and occupation, and they all drown at the same time of the year. What? I said as the hair on my arm rose. As much as I had thought about doing this type of project, I never had the time to research the history of drownings in the pond. The reporter had done a preliminary background check and was obviously disturbed by what she had found. Caucasian males between the ages of 18 to 25 years old who are in the military are the most likely candidates for drowning in the pond during the late summer months. Of course, being malihini to Hawaii and having no knowledge of the pond's dangers, they may be more inclined to act recklessly around the falls. Their military background and youthfulness may add to their need to demonstrate their machismo in a daredevil manner. All of these factors may contribute to the fact that this small percent group of males have a disproportionate standing in the percentage of people who have died in the drowning pool. However, I add a bit of historical background to the reporter's fascinating inquiry into the mystery of this pond. The old name for the falls was not Waimea. The older name was Waihe'e, a name associated with a warrior and kahuna, or priest, by the name of Koi, who had been given the valley in the names of Kahikili during the 18th century. Kahikili was a great chief of Maui who extended his powerful rule to Oahu, dividing up the control of the island among his favorite chiefs. Koi was from Wailuku, where he maintained Waihe'e Heiau, a sacred temple where human sacrifice was performed. The name given to the falls is the same name as that of this temple where this fierce warrior made human offerings to his gods of war and conquest. At Waimea Valley, Koi assembled a powerful army of men who were, like himself, pahupu, cut in two warriors. Samuel M. Kamako describes them as strange-looking men, tattooed black from head to toe, with eyelids turned inside out and held up by props, and only their eyeballs and teeth left in their natural state. In May 12th of 1792, the storeship Daedalus of Captain George Vancouver's squadron visited Waimea Bay. 4 men went ashore to collect fresh water, including Commander Lieutenant Hurgist, the astronomer William Gooch, and 2 seamen. As they hiked into the valley, they were ambushed by Pahupu warriors. The body of William Gooch and 2 other men were then taken to Pu'o Mahuka Heiau on the upper ridge overlooking the valley, where rituals of human sacrifice were performed. William Gooch, by the way, was a 21-year-old Caucasian military officer of the British Navy. The reporter gave out a long sigh as we pondered the mysterious way in which coincidences sometimes take a firm grasp upon the imagination. The conclusion to this tale is yours, dear reader, for as you wonder what unknown force awaits as you take the long leap into the dark and murky drowning pool beneath your feet.
Wow.
Wow.
It's a lot.
Wow. That's why I don't jump off a cliff. Like in Waimea. That's in Waimea, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was Waimea.
That's why I don't do that. What's your initial thought while reading that story, Micah?
Well, I appreciated and understood the significance of people coming to the island and then not knowing or not respecting traditions, cultures, customs, and then not knowing how to be respectful of the environment and being able to understand everything or the history of this place and the things that happen here. So
Yeah. I think I was like that at first. I was, it's not that I was not respectful, but at the same time I don't understand why are people like from, especially people here in Hawaii, are very respectful towards their lands. They're very they love their lands, they love their ancestors, they treat it as their family and stuff. So when I heard that story, what you read, I feel like they know like how to treat it, like how to
For sure.
how to become one with them. I feel like, especially with the gods,
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what's more troubling, I guess, was human sacrifice.
Yeah.
I mean, like for every single culture, I guess that we know of, like before, they did do that, but it's just bizarre to me, like hearing the story that they also did that here, and it involves water, I guess, and yeah, that's
Maybe it just occurred to me that that's why maybe I'm still scared of like waters,
still
deep
water
waters.
at least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Are you scared of deep waters?
more or less. I mean, I'm an okay swimmer, even though I did grow up here in Laie. I don't know. I prefer hiking to swimming, so that's but yeah, I'm not usually, if there's any kind of like deep water and it's not a regular standard swimming pool, I'm more likely to stay in the shallow end.
Yeah.
That's true. Same.
True.
Both out of my own safety and then especially here in Hawaii, it's I want to make sure that if I'm going someplace, I'm aware of how to be respectful
Yeah.
to my surroundings.
That's
So.
true.
For sure.
Yeah.
All right. You did mention that you grew up here in Laie. And so we want to know a little bit more about that. So can you talk about a little bit about yourself, like maybe your major, any hobbies, interests, what are you studying right now, and other things?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Micah. For anyone who has has a computer science degree or a major, you might know my dad. He's Aaron Curtis, works in the computer science department here. I moved here when I was 7. And so I grew up here. I went to Kahuku High School and graduated from there. I was in vocal motion and the jazz band, parade band, symphonic band there. And then, I started going here in the winter of 2022. I met my wife about 3 months after I got here, and then we were married in the summer of 2023. I served a mission in the summer of 2022. I was an AVA performing missionary. An excellent experience. I loved it. I'm a vocal performance major, so I like singing. I play saxophone. I play piano. I play ukulele. I also love writing music. And I also I've been wanting to get into the voice acting business as well. So I love that and like audiobooks and whatnot. So this is a really fun opportunity to kind of just
Pretty cool.
get into
Yeah.
reading.
Yeah.
Wow, you're an all-performing artist. We love that. Okay, so we're actually going to do something new here. So,
Right.
we want to do like a quick speed round of Halloween questions. So you have to be quick.
All right.
Okay, so ready?
Okay.
Candy corn, love it or hate it?
Love it.
Favorite Halloween costume you've ever worn?
I guess me and my friends did a bunch of Gravity Falls characters
Oh,
last year. It was a lot of fun.
wow, that's cool. Okay, trick or treat?
Treats. I have such a big sweet tooth.
Okay. Ghosts, real or not?
Entirely depends on the context.
Which context is that?
I don't know.
Okay, we'll skip that one. Go.
Carve a pumpkin or paint it?
I feel like I have a little more skill with painting than carving. I have shaky hands, so.
Okay. Scariest Halloween movie you've seen?
I guess Probably, there's a movie called, it's not really a Halloween movie, but there's a movie called Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter.
I love that.
It's such a good movie. It's a
People hate it though, but I love it.
No,
I
it's
don't know
Wait, is
why.
that a
genuinely-
cartoon?
It's not.
No,
it's like
no.
real life.
It's like
No,
live
it's a-
action?
It's so no. I got introduced to it last year. It's very violent, but it has some of
No.
the best action scenes I've seen in any movie. Honestly,
like it,
better
yeah.
than Marvel in my opinion. It's
I got curious. I'm gonna watch it.
go check it
Yeah.
out. It's really
Okay.
It's
good.
really good.
Haunted houses, yes or no?
I get scared so easily. So
Oh, have you ever been to Haunted Plantation?
I have once.
Oh,
I don't watch a lot of horror movies because I get spooked real easily.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
Okay. Sweet treats or spooky scares?
sweet treats. Yeah,
Favorite Halloween candy?
I love Butterfingers so
Oh.
much.
Best Halloween party or tradition?
Ooh. We usually do, my friends and I do like tabletop role-playing games, so like Dungeons and Dragons and whatnot, and we usually have a one-shot that we do every year, some kind of spooky themed campaign that we run and that we play in. So
Okay.
That's fun. Okay, skeletons or zombies?
probably skeletons.
Skeletons.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Last, would you spend the night in a haunted house for money?
For money, depends on how much.
Let's say 50 million.
Oh, absolutely. If I'm set for life, yeah, for sure.
But the one where Amityville Horror was Amityville, like the Amityville something?
Horror?
Yeah, Amityville Horror something
Character?
Once again, if it's $50 million,
50 million. It's 50.
anything less than, I think anything less than $10,000 would have me be like,
No, let's not do
even
that.
like 5,000, I'd be like, no, it's not worth it. But
Okay.
give me like 10,000 or above, but 50 million, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Are you kidding?
Okay.
I'm sleeping good that night.
Okay, so now that we've gotten to know you a little bit more, I think we're ready to listen to the second story. So are you ready?
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Let's go for it.
So this story is The Haunting of H3 Freeway. All right. During the construction of the highly controversial H3 across the island of Oahu, stories began to circulate in the community concerning unusual supernatural events which were taking place on the costly project. The path of the freeway cut into undeveloped Halava Valley on the leeward side of the island, bored through the Ko'olau Mountains, and then destroyed the scenic view of Haiku Valley with a ribbon of ugly cement. Beyond the political and environmental issues involved in the massive governmental project, many voices protested the fact that this freeway would destroy scores of valuable ancient historic sites. Native Hawaiian heiau, or temples of significant values, were being threatened. Even a curse had been placed on the H3 construction project. Deaths occurred during the construction due to freak accidents. A section of the freeway collapsed in the summer of 1996 in an area near one of the heiau being disturbed. Stories of phantom hitchhikers being picked up in Haiku Valley surfaced as luminous spirits floating out of the hard rock of the Ko'olau Mountains was seen by several workers inside the tunnel. Many of these stories were collected by cultural specialist Mahealani Cypher who one day will hopefully share them in detail with a wider audience interested in the spiritual dimensions of Hawaii. A few first-hand accounts of supernatural encounters have also come to my attention. During the placement of the special tiles which lined the walls of the tunnel, one of the construction workers told me that he was busy with a small crew one early morning on the graveyard shift. As they were securing the tiles into place, they all heard the distinct sound of a conch shell blowing. Looking toward the Haiku Valley entrance of the tunnel, they noticed a thick white mist gently blowing into the tunnel. Inside the mist, the sound of the conch could be distinctly heard. Dropping their work, the men fled from this mysterious cloud, which heralded the strange sounds of another world. It should be noted to the skeptics who have claimed these workers created these yarns to get attention, that the person who shared these stories quit his job. He took the risk of finding other employment over working on a project that he felt may be a desecration. On another occasion, I met an engineer who had moved to Hawaii from the east coast of the U.S. as to work on the H3 freeway. He had absolutely no background in Hawaiian culture or history and culture, and knew nothing about the controversy surrounding the construction of the freeway. Ghosts had never bothered him in his precise and calculated material world. Yet, when he was doing the survey of the lands near the Heiau in Halawa Valley, which was believed by Hawaiians to be an important female temple, he distinctly heard the sound of children playing in the sacred site. They were talking loudly to one another in a language he did not recognize, but he could easily recognize, the native Hawaiian language. When he went to see who was playing in the temple without authorization, he was shocked to discover that the area was absolutely empty of children, adults, or any living soul. Yet moments earlier, he distinctly had heard the young people speaking to each other in the ancient language of the islands. Following this incident, the engineer researched some of the cultural and historical concerns surrounding the H3 freeway and decided to find another job. Like other people involved in the project who had uncanny experiences, he believed that it was far better to be safe than sorry. When the freeway was opened to public use in 1998, the stories concerning its haunting began to circulate almost immediately. On the first week after the opening of H3, an individual called Chickenskin, the radio show, to report how he had been driving up the tunnel on the Halawa Valley side of the freeway when he had a flat tire. He pulled his car over just at the entrance to the tunnel. As he got out of the car to change the tire, he was greeted by a Hawaiian woman in a kikepa or tapa sarong worn under one arm and over the shoulder of the other. She was a friendly, middle-aged woman who spoke to him only a few words in English. He thought she was one of the Hawaiian activists whose many protests to the freeway he had been watching on the news. She reassured him that if he needed help, she was certain that it was on its way. Even before he could answer, another vehicle pulled over with the headlights bathing him in an automobile in a white glare. The other driver got out of the car offering assistance. The driver then turned around to tell the Hawaiian woman that she had been indeed prophetic. However, to his surprise, she had vanished from the other side of the road. Looking down over the embankment, he saw that there was no one anywhere to be seen. Curious, he asked the other driver if he had seen where the Hawaiian woman in the kikepa had gone. "What woman?" the driver answered. He swore that he had pulled over to offer assistance and that there had been no woman standing on the side of the freeway next to the stranded motorist. The most recent story, which has been shared throughout the internet, involves a couple driving back one evening to Kailua on H3 just a few moments after the freeway opened. As they were driving along within the speed limit, the blue lights of the policeman's patrol car flashed in their mirrors. They were pulled over, they naturally assumed, for some traffic violation. What in the world they had been doing wrong, the driver wondered as he looked for his driver's license. What in the world had he been doing wrong? The driver wondered as he looked for his driver's license, car registration, and insurance card. As the officer walked up to the car, the driver was about to plead innocent to having committed any traffic violation, when the policeman leaned down and politely gave some advice to the motorist. "Sir," the officer said, "you should keep your children seat-belted in the back when you're driving. It is very dangerous to allow them to jump in the back around like that in the back seat." "What children?" the driver asked. "The ones in the back seat that were playing around," the officer said, shining his flashlight into the rear area. The young couple had no children. As everyone could clearly see, there were no children in the back seat of the car. Even the officer was a little bit nervous, having insisted that he could see children playing and jumping around at the back seat as he pulled up behind the vehicle. The whole incident could have been explained away as an optical illusion except for one small factor. In the morning following their mysterious encounter with the policeman, the husband got in the car and noticed on the back window something which they would have never been able to notice the night before. The windows were terribly smudged from the inside with a pattern of dozens of little hands pressed up against the glass.
Oh my gosh.
There were children inside a car? Wow.
Okay.
That's spooky.
Yeah. What do you think about it? What's the whole story for you?
Honestly, it like I said earlier in my quick answer, I prefer to take a sort of back seats opinion when it comes to ghosts and scary stories. But I do feel like a lot of the culture here is very strong. And so I'm personally not one to deny any occurrence of instances or things happening here, because who knows?
True. I would say it's the same for me. Like in my culture, nature is a very big part of it. Gods and goddesses are a big part of it. So I feel like every single thing that the older generation would, like tell, even if it's just to spook children around, I'd believe them because I know they're wise and they're old and they've lived long enough to tell these stories. Yeah. What about you?
That's totally true. I think I've heard something about from a friend of mine, like before with that kind of story, that especially if you're kind of like Hawaiian, it's like literally chilling if you get to encounter like those type of ghosts, like the army ghost or something. What is it called again?
Are you referring to Menehune?
Yeah, kind of like that. Okay. So it's kind of like scary. When I was like listening to her like telling me those kind of stories, I was like, no, please don't tell me. I'm scared. Yeah. Especially like I usually love to travel, not travel, but kind of like, go around the town and stuff. So
I did like a quick Google search while you were reading, and it says that the freeway didn't open until 1997 because of the protests.
Yeah.
And so
it was very controversial.
Yeah.
It was on a similar vein. I just sorry. Something I got raised on growing up around here was you don't whistle at night. That's like
what does that mean?
Like if you do not whistle at night because that's A, it's like it's bad luck, and B, it can like
spirits?
Yeah. I have heard.
Do you whistle at night?
Sometimes I do in the shower.
It's because I know for some people it's like some people just don't know, or but I've heard from, especially from like other Hawaiians either on campus or in the community, of sometimes I forget I'm like whistling and they're like, hey, got that out. So
what other things did you learn from like living here about, I don't know, like this time of the year maybe?
I don't know. It just being sometimes you see things when you're out camping up in the mountains, or you see things out in the water, and there can be any number of explanations, but it really circles back around to the idea of like, you respect the land and it respects you. Sure. You take care of the land, it takes care of you. But if you are reckless and aren't careful, then you have what's coming to you.
True.
Yeah. Okay, so thank you so much for being here with us today, Micah, and we hope you guys enjoyed these stories as much as we did. Happy Halloween, and these are your hosts, Valerie
and Myco.
See you next week, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.